Let's talk about spatial dimensions first. How exactly, we all agree that like a three-dimensional thing maybe has like more depth or more perspective or more, like allows us to know more about the world that it is part of, right? If I have a zero-dimensional thing, a point, there's nothing that I can be told aside from this point is here, this point is here, this point is here, this point is here. But there isn't depth, there isn't parallax, there isn't movement, there isn't this sort of thing that like allows that object to literally be infinitely more. However, there is some way that we can get from a zero-dimensional thing to a one-dimensional thing. So if you think about a point in space, and then you put another point in space, those 2 points in space, because of their context, because of their relationship, create a line. And the interesting thing about a line is that you could take infinite points and you could like line them up right next to each other, or near infinite points and line them up right next to each other, and it still actually wouldn't create that line. The line is actually this relationship, this description of those 2 points in relationship with each other. And this is like a really, really like borderline spiritual thing to me, that somehow these things that are like of one dimension, because of their relationship with each other, can somehow like oscillate or change each other, and because of that, dimension is created. And like obviously we could go all the way into fractals and start talking about mathematics, but for the sake of this discussion, let's just say like dot, magic, whoa, line. But that magic happens at every scale, right? So if you have like one line, right, that we made from whoa, magic, and we have another line that, oh, whoa, magic over here, like all of a sudden, those 2 lines create an actual plane, create another dimension, just by being like, whoa, this is here and this is here, and somehow this oscillation, somehow this relationship is just going, and now there's a plane. And the same exact thing happens with 2 planes to create a cube, and we could go all the way up in spatial dimensions, even though like our understanding of these dimensions is pretty limited. This is a really, really interesting phenomenon, and I've been trying to describe this same thing at a much more complex level, which is the dimension of story, or the dimension of craft. And know that the analogy falls apart at many locations, but I want to kind of like still try to use it because I think it's one that's like feels cool at the very least. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a few projects that I've been working on and kind of try to describe how I crafted the dimensions of them. So this first one is a pretty simple project, and it's interesting because it's just a single object. So you can still craft a single object. You know, like you can take a point and you can choose where to put that point in space. It still is like a zero-dimensional thing. It still is just a single object. But where you place it and where you move it and how you rotate it, all of these things matter and help define the actual thing. So we looked at the size of the bumps, but what if we go back down to the old bump size and we change the speed of the bumps? You can see that this again completely changes what that object is. Like this is heinous. I don't want to show this for very long. But you can see that like by the way that we like craft and move these dimensions, we're able to define what a thing is. What happens when we talk about moving from a single thing to the interactions between things? Like this thing is just a single thing, we can craft it, but like what would it mean to do the same thing with objects as we did with points? Like to take one point and say, okay, this goes here, one point, this goes here, and then somehow start trying to create that magical oscillation between the two of them that by context and by relationship, it creates dimension. So this is a very, very simplistic way of describing this, but in this next example, we have one very, very specific object repeated so many times, and the truth of the process and the thing that we're crafting actually falls within the relationship between these objects and the way that they all interact. So instead of like defining like a single thing and carrying only what that thing is, you're defining a very simple thing, taking that very simple thing, and then wondering what happens when you create a bunch of those and talk about their relationship. And this one, to me, even though it's like actually an extremely simple program, like it was done in like a few hours as a demo, like it's still says something or creates some emotion, like creates some perspective and lets you understand something about the world a bit more. So we've talked about dimensions, but we haven't really talked about like why is understanding what a dimension is important. For me, the sort of depth and perspective, it isn't enough to just say like it has more depth, it has more perspective. Why is depth, why is perspective important to us? And obviously, again, all of this can be applied to VR. Why is VR important to us? Because it gives us more perspective. Okay, why is perspective important to us? Again, this gets into kind of like wishy-washy territory, so I'll leave that more of like a thought exercise. But for me personally, this perspective allows me to rise out of my normal human day-to-day life and see the world at a slightly higher perspective. It's like those moments when you climb up a mountain and you look down and you say like, oh, like this is here and this is here. Like I didn't know that I just had to cross one river. Or like imagine you're at a canyon and you see this vast chasm between like you and your best friend, and all you want to do is be with your best friend, and they're just there, and there's just this void that like somehow cannot be bridged because it's there and it's infinite and it's going in all directions. But somehow you like climb a tower and you're able to say like, oh, this is just like a little hole in the ground. If I just like walk this way for long enough, I can go back around. To me, this is the sort of thing that perspective does emotionally. By informing us more about the reality we live in, by informing us more about like where we are and what we are, we're able to more articulately act in a way that is like meaningful and beautiful towards other people. Obviously, I don't think that this is going to make somebody just like go hug a stranger, but the idea is that like maybe something will, like maybe some way we can take all of these contexts, we can move them all, and we can create a way that will like actually move people, and we'll take them and like rip them out of here up to here, and they go, oh my God, the earth is so beautiful, instead of just like looking at a bunch of trees. I mean, which is equally beautiful, but like being able to see it at a different level. So that's why dimension is important to me, but we still really haven't talked about like what the next dimension is. Right now we've covered maybe the crafting of an object, right? And then the crafting of interactions of objects. But what happens when we actually like begin to craft objects and then craft the interactions of those objects? So we're no longer looking at a very simple thing like there is some craft to these little arrows. They're important. It's important that they have these lines to give you a sense of direction. It's important that they're flat so you can tell what way they're facing. Like it is not as though these are not thought about, but they're not thought about in the same sort of like intentional, deep, like whoa, magic way. What happens when we like start thinking about not just the things we're creating in that magic way, but the relationship between those things? So this is one of the first things that I'll turn this down for a second, and then I'll let us all listen to it. This is one of the first things that I created to kind of made me feel like, oh, like I made something that actually makes sense and isn't just like a demo. It somehow has like some of that weird oscillation, iridescence, like oh factor that somehow made me realize more about the world just by looking at it and the way it interacted. So basically, all it is in some ways it all is a single object, like this one weird pulsing space creature. But in other ways, you can like break that down and say like, okay, now we have a bunch of tendrils, and the way that those tendrils interact, the way that they're placed on the planet, all of those tell us more. And then we have these black spheres, the way that they interact with the tendrils also tell us more. And it allows us more dimensions to play in. It allows us more of like this interaction, so that there are these like strict, hard black surfaces and these super shimmering like objects that like interact in totally different ways and provide some sort of oscillation between their two ideas. So let's just listen to this music for a bit. So each song has its own sort of emotional thing that it's trying to create. One thing that's interesting about this is that built into it is literally a way to like more like specifically play with these like kind of single dimensional things that we've seen. So let's change the float force, which is the force pulling them all out, to more. If this works. Oh no, I might have done something that broke this. Crap. Told you the ideas aren't fully formed yet. Yeah, I know what's screwed up about this. Okay, that's not gonna work. Failure number 1. Oh, here we go. So at least we can change some of the physical parts of it. So now we're like actually like saying like, okay, what is the color of this? What is this dimension? We can change that dimension. What is the other dimension of this? And you can tell that just like by changing this to purple and this to purple, like this is automatically like a very different understanding and a very different emotion. But if we can individually craft each one of those so that there's a relationship between the two of them, we're making something that has maybe, hopefully, some of that sort of whoa factor. So I'm going to take you to another one that doesn't have the option of changing it, but is just like trying to be as specific and as crafted a scene as possible. And I'm just going to let the music play for a bit as we look at this. So here we see not just these thank you. We see not just these objects, right? But objects where it says like, okay, the emotion of this song is somehow dark. We have to put it in a void. Like the song is somehow like moving forward. Like how do we communicate like this sense of movement or this sense of direction? And like, how do you make it like somehow things are driving each other, or there's this relationship of like the darkness of the song. And you can see like we have like the actual movements of all these little bee monk things, whatever they are. We have the particle movements that are on those bee monks. We have this like bottom base plate and its movement, and each one of these has all these crazy dimensions that like somehow interact with each other. And the more that we can tie them together, the more that we can tightly knit and like juxtapose them, the more that we get to just again do this like, whoa, like, okay, this is somehow creating something that was not there before. I use the word synergy, but like obviously everything else that comes with using that word I don't want to use, but like try to remove all the bad parts of that, and then like we've got a word that like maybe makes sense to describe like the creation of dimension. With this though, you're still limiting yourself to something like the last one we saw was like kind of a single object, maybe a juxtaposition of objects, and it changed as you click different things. But that sort of like that same sort of thing can be taken to a much farther level. So this one is like a scene where the changing is actually built into the scene. So we have all these different songs, right? And all these songs are, you know, like the lines are decided like, okay, we want this juxtaposition of this like very like, you know, retro future UI with this like weird pulsing organic thing. And like there's, and you're looking at these different tools that like really excel in different dimensions. So like, for example, the model on this is like all made with one of the sculpting tools of Leap Motion. And like, I'm totally incapable of making anything but this like totally like grotesque, fleshy thing. And so being able to like then create that and then say like, okay, I've made this one thing, it has this one dimension, it has this one meaning. How do I take something else that would then provide additional meaning to this like weird, gloopy, like flesh object? And these like more precise cubes and this more precise interface kind of does that. And this one has a bunch of different songs you can play. And each different song also gives you a different visual and is trying to create a different emotion just with that single shape in the middle. And all of these, by the way, are on Kabibo. I'll leave the URL up for you guys to check out at the end. So now we're talking about like not just crafting an object. We're talking about crafting an object of objects, and we're talking about crafting like the interaction with those objects of objects. Each one of these is like metaing in some weird way and allows us the opportunity to like tell more in that story, to provide more depth, to provide more perspective, to like let people like raise above the void that separates them from other people and like walk around that and just like give their homie a hug. You know, like I don't think these do that, but like that's the goal. You know, that's the thing that like we have to strive for, is to like let humans be humans with other humans in like a more human, more real way. So now we get into the next dimension that really interests me, which is somehow creating a world in which you have all these dimensions that are interacting with each other, but somehow as the story progresses, somehow as the user learns more about the space, they are actually dynamically like placing new points and creating the dimensions themselves. So it's like giving somebody the opportunity to like kind of like participate in that movement between dimensions, because it is so much more magical to like get to be like, whoa, than it is to like watch somebody else just going like, whoa. And, you know, it's like watching somebody in the rift just being like, oh my God. And you're like, all I want is to be inside there. Like, this is unfair that I have to watch you do this thing that like should be for all of us. And to me, like games are kind of like a way that you can do that. You're creating not just a scene, you're creating not just an object, which is used, like the object is used to provide context to other objects to create a scene, but then somehow you can use a bunch of scenes to provide context for each other to make a story. You know, like if you think about like a movie is a series of these scenes, and each one of those scenes can be broken down into specific objects that are set up around, and like each one of those objects could be broken down even more. I don't know exactly how, I haven't gotten that far into that analogy, but it's there, I think. But like somehow this juxtaposition of all these scenes provides us enough information to just like be like, oh wait, reality isn't just this. Reality isn't just this. It's like this. It's this. You know, like, oh my gosh, like I thought reality was this. Reality is freaking way bigger than I thought it was. And like whenever we start feeling that, like I feel like it gives us more of a thought of like, okay, cool, it's all gonna be okay, and like I can just be great to everybody because like everything's part of this like whoa thing. And every time we say whoa, like I usually think that's a good thing. I'm gonna really quickly take you guys through this experience. I'm gonna do it very quickly, but imagine somebody using this for the first time. It'd be like much more slow and thoughtful and poignant. And this one also you can check out if you have WebVR, an Oculus and Leap Motion. It's built for that, but it's easier to get to show you guys instead of be standing here going, whoa. So with this one, we've got like this little city here. It looks like a circuit board. It's like this very strict structured thing that's sort of like, that's very much like, okay, this is like kind of like maybe a grid system where it's how we think of like our world, and like our worlds have all these streets, and it's very like da, 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 da. But like, what's the point of that? Like, why are we building these cities? Why are we building these like circuits of ourselves? And so then hopefully the user says like, oh, well, what does this weird tube go to in the distance? Like, I really like whatever's out here. Like, I like that moon. I like those mountains or whatever they are. And they get to this thing, this weird thing that the tube from the city is going to. And there's this interface, and you can do things with this to change how this object looks. You can do things with the actual physics of it. But it's just like another toy to play with. But hopefully they look at that and then they say like, okay, well, what is this thing? Like, what is the rest of this world? You know, they go, they explore, they move around, and then if they explore enough, at some point in time, they notice this. And then when they notice that, maybe they click on it. And now we see power flowing from this city towards this object. And these little monks have appeared. What are they? What do they do? Like, there is this new dimension that has entered this world. What does that tell me about the place we're in? Oh my gosh, when I touch them, they turn rainbow too, like that first pedestal. Oh my gosh, why did that change happen? Like, what is this new information telling me? What is this new dimension telling me? What is this new point of reality that I did not expect to be there do for me? I want to know where those strings went. Where did their voices go? I thought they were singing to that flesh cube, but now they're singing back this direction. Oh, they're going back to here. What is here that is important now? Like, what does this new dimension tell me? So you can see how, like, thank you. You can see how, like it might not make total sense, but like there's some weird thing that starts happening when you start giving things context that you didn't really know had context before. And any time you see like a new point on a scatter plot, it starts kind of like telling you more about like the reality you live in. Like, do you guys ever play with the, like, when you do the speaker and then you pour the sand on it or the rice on it, and as it kind of like jitters and moves, like those move into the position of like this invisible thing that is there. But like somehow by providing yourself all these points of reference with all this information and looking at the relationship between them, all of a sudden you get to start to see this like invisible like beast that is like this invisible thing that is there, that is like there in different ways every time we view art, every time we look at anything, every time we even use an interface. It's like revealing something about this hidden world that we couldn't see unless we like were able to talk about it in terms of dimensions. So we've gotten to a point where like I think that maybe it goes like from like object to scene to story. And I don't really know what the next one is. Like conceptually we can understand a fourth dimension spatially. Or we can understand a fourth dimension mathematically, but like we don't, like we're kind of limited spatially to understanding that. But I absolutely don't believe that same limitation occurs to us in this story aspect. Like maybe something like Skyrim is this, where it's like not just an individual object, it's not an individual scene, it's not an individual story. It's like a bunch of stories that are interacting with each other, and somehow those stories, by interacting, give themselves more context to create an even more full, even more dimensional thing that lets us see deeper into like the reality that actually is, not this fake one. You know, like the fourth dimension isn't actually important. Like there's this one short story I read about like this doctor who was talking about like drawing a 2D thing, and if you're like a 3D person in the 2D world, you could like reach over and like pull out somebody's kidney, and like it would be okay. It would, like surgery would be the easiest. You just go whoop and you pull it out. But like the point was not to be like this like demigod that could exist in the fourth dimension. It would be like, oh cool, like like my homie no longer has this kidney that they don't need. You know, what is important is not actually these extra dimensions. It's like how they provide context and allow us to understand the world that we actually live in. So I'm going to stop for questions very soon. I want to show you guys one more project, which is this picture book that I've been working on for a long time. I'm not going to go through the entire thing. It's like 30 minutes long. We definitely don't have time for that, but it's all online. I'll put the URL up later. But I'm just going to go through like 2 pages of it and let you guys kind of experience that. It's very slow moving, so be prepared to chill. Let me actually take you guys to this. So the story roughly is there's a creature trying to find their place in the world, try to understand why they matter, what's important. They find some friends. The friends are awesome. And then this is the point at which those friends that they found that they felt defined truth to them no longer existed. Manny led her friends to a sparkling expanse of stars. How glorious these shapes were. As they drifted past her, Manny examined their infinitely precise textures. How Soul must love these sequins, she thought, and turned to see the sense of wonder emanating from Soul's being. Soul is her friend. But Soul was not behind Manny, and their other friends were not behind Soul. There was just the floating hexagons, Manny, and the darkness. Manny felt a sense of sadness she never before imagined. Where could they have gone? She was sure they'd followed her, but here in the field of stars, they were nowhere to be seen. The cold mist surged in around her, and she realized now what it meant to be alone. She felt the warmth of her friends. To be without it was chilling. She tried again and again to console herself, trying to see the beauty of her friends and the sequins, but her lonely pain could not be quelled by imagined comfort. She had to find them again, no matter what. So she flew onward, praying the direction she traveled would lead her again to the warmth of her friends. Manny could not believe she lost her friends. It was too much to bear, too much to remember the love she felt for them, she felt for Soul. Around her, small ribbons flocked. Their motions were soothing, but were not enough to help her overcome her heartbreak. The ribbons moved gently, peacefully swirling around their visitor. Manny could not feel their serenity, only seeing them as ghosts of her lost friends. As sweet as their song seemed, it was not enough, and Manny resigned herself to her well of sorrow. She thought she had discovered her meaning amongst her friends, but what truth could be so easily destroyed? She must have been mistaken. How could the dark be part of the tapestry if all it brought was agony? Swam, filled with anguish, remembering the crystals, tendrils, and tree. She thought of Soul and her compassionate movements, their friends circling around them both. Oh, how she missed them, how she wished she had cherished her time in their presence. She could feel the darkness curling around her, winding its icy grip around the deepest part of her being. She tried to remember that in her moment of epiphany, she had felt a certain intimacy, a fellowship with the darkness. Though she remembered, she did not feel anything but loneliness. Manny was ready for the quiet to come, for this melancholy fantasy to finally end. But the quiet did not come, and Manny hoped for something more. Maybe it was because she could feel some presence near, or just because she refused to believe that this sorrow was all there was. Manny kept moving. With every ounce of remaining light in her broken soul, Manny swam forward. So I'm gonna leave you guys here. Definitely check out the book at some point in time, but hopefully that kind of, instead of like talking about the hologram inside my head, just like more instantaneously takes it and then puts it in your head. I think we have some time for questions. Cool. Thank you so much, and please ask questions.
In light of this pretty damn interesting presentation, there are two creative works that came to mind when I saw this. I was curious if they had any influence on this. One is the game Proteus.
Proteus, David Kanaga, who did the audio for Proteus, and I love Proteus. Proteus is...
Okay.
David Kanaga has actually been working on a really, really interesting paper called Play Space and Dimension and New Fractal Play Spaces, that talks about like interactivity and talks about all of this in like a much, much deeper way. It's like extremely dense. You know, he's like, okay, at this point, can you go like read The Story of the Eye? Or like at this point, can you like go read like, you know, like this one thing and then come back like after you've done that. Like it's a work that could literally take you years to get through, but it's every part of it is brilliant. Try to find a copy of it. I think it's a free PDF online.
Well,
yes.
What's the name of it again?
Something in New Fractal Play Spaces.
Okay.
I'll hit me up on Twitter and I'll send you to it.
And the second work was a book called The 10th Dimension.
I do not know this one, but obviously I'm interested because Proteus was the right answer.
Okay.
Up here? Oh. Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Yeah.
I feel like I use completely different language to talk about some of the same phenomena that you're talking about. So let me just throw some holograms your way.
Do it.
All right. So I've been teaching game design in this school of thought called the MDA framework for 10 years or so. We like to break down video games, which is my industry, into mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetic.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the members of our sort of school of thought, Clint Hawking, gave a really interesting talk at the Game Developers Conference a couple of years ago where he talked about how films create meaning and how games create meaning. And I almost think the in-between thing that you're talking about, I might use the word meaning on.
Yeah.
The two examples I'd throw your way briefly, because I know we're trying to get through a bunch of things. In that talk, he talked about how in film, it was this whole new medium where first they were just treating it like a stage with a camera in front of it. But then a filmmaker was like, here, let me show you a picture of a guy's face and some food, and a picture of the guy's face. And then the same picture of the guy's face, and a shivering child, and a picture of the guy's face. And like you project meaning onto that the actor didn't have in his head.
Yeah.
And in games, we can say there's a mechanic like you fly when your scarf is long.
Yeah.
And when you're near someone else, your scarf regenerates.
Yeah.
But when you actually interact with those mechanics and our playing journey, the dynamics create meaning. And I think in VR, there is something else that creates meaning, and we haven't found it yet.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that, I mean, like one of the things that I believe is that like there's meaning in certain things in VR, but like the most meaningful things is going to be like the way that like we actually change how we interact with our computer. You know, like the way that like I actually get to like program in 3D space, or like have like a multiplayer thing where like me and you are literally creating something together, like Tilt Brush, but multiplayer, just like chilling and just like making reality.
Yeah.
That
and
to me
your
is
scenes to stories thing was exactly demonstrating that. Like you have scenes that are disjointed, but when you put them together, there's meaning.
Yeah.
So anyway,
yeah, cool. No, those are perfect. Thank you so much. Let me do this. That's the notes for the talk.
What would you say is your target audience? Because obviously this is like a really advanced way of storytelling and such. Like you can portray pictures with words much easier using these. So what would you say? Because it seems easily accessible. So what's the audience?
Target audience is like another, like just a single other human being. Like for this one, like when like somebody who I looked up to and like respected said that it made them cry, like that was the target audience. Just like making sure that like my insanity is like not just in my own head, and that like everybody else is insane too, you know?
Yeah. So it's also a way of kind of connecting with people almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one thing that's really interesting about Dimension is like all these discussions we have like don't actually make sense until there's an observer on it. So like I've been doing a lot with this new language called Haskell, which is like a really fun conceptual language. But one thing that's super interesting is it's lazy. So basically it doesn't do anything until you actually need it. So like I can do all these computations, like write all these computations, like multiply 1 by infinity times, but until I say like I need this, like print this, then it doesn't do anything. And for me, like the parallel there is like until other humans are seeing it, like it doesn't actually matter. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with VR. Like I'm going from doing stuff on the web, which is like the most accessible, to like VR, which is like one of the least accessible. And I think that's like one of the biggest things that we need to confront right now, is that like the important part is humans. The important part are like humans are awesome, and like let's be more human and let's help everybody be more human. But right now it's like humans are awesome, let's help really, really rich people be more human. Yes. Which hopefully is like a good change, and hopefully like they then have the power to like, you know, whatever, but like it's something we definitely need to be considering.
Thank you.
Yeah, good questions.
Hi, I can tell you, I saw your storybook over at Verse, and it made me cry when I first saw it. So
hopefully not in like, oh, why is this so bad? Why does it exist?
It's a problem when you have goggles on or something.
Oh yeah. I definitely like the first time I tried the Verse Ebola doc. Like I didn't really understand live action in VR at all, and then I saw that and was just like sobbing, and I was like, wait, this is a problem. Like we can't tell like that good of stories. Like we have to find like the point right before crying and then tell all those stories first.
No, I think you got to go for the tears. They just got to account for it in the goggle.
Yeah, exactly.
But I just want to commend you, and I'd love to chat with you.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk afterwards.
Yeah, some of my work early on was leading this way, and
awesome.
What you're doing is just really, really exciting.
Thank you very much.
I have to say I was completely blown away by this whole presentation. I'm very interested in the way that you can evoke empathy in your experiences. And this was, I mean, especially the last one was just like, I could relate to that. I just felt like really compelled, really excited. And also like just emotions, different emotions, like talking about the darkness versus the light and how they're connected.
Yeah.
All that was just so, such an interesting experience, especially through, a virtual world. I loved it. I have a question for you. How much of these experiences that you created were strategically planned, and how much of it was like procedural? Like the city, did you plan these different
none
pieces?
Like I have no idea. When I'm doing this is like I have no idea. I mean the last one, like the story, like one night I like came up with this story and like storyboarded it all out, and I'm like I have to make this, and then like a year later I made it, but it was like totally different than the storyboard. So like with that one specifically, like what it is kind of like a chain of things. So this specific object I was working on a while for a VR project that I did with Leap Motion called Rainbow Membrane, which is basically this, but like you're inside of it and you're reaching around and like touching it, and it's super like weird and jiggly and it feels great, but then like it's like, okay, cool, I've made this thing and that makes sense. Is there any way that like this word that I've just made, like I can use somewhere else, anywhere, in any way, this like point or line that I just made, like the awesome part about programming is like once you make a line, you can take that line and like use it anywhere and bop, 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 bop. And so a lot of this was like figuring out like these different simulations. So like the first page that we were on this one, these sparkles, for example, was like something where I watched a demo that Eddie Lee did, who's actually right there, and he just like made these like super beautiful hexagonal sparkles, and I was like, oh, I'm stealing those. Like you made that, like that's mine now, you know? And it's really cool because like with programming, like even though I didn't ask him permission or anything and you might hate me for it, like there's just so much more of a sense of like everybody is helping each other create things, and like all we need to do are create the things that like make sense to other people so that they can steal. So like the frame, you know, was inspired by like this video called Unified Approaches to Grown Structures, which is like just some random video. It's like, oh, cool, things being in front and behind the frame, or like watching Secret of Kells and being like, oh, they did this and this and this. You know, like all we're doing is like taking words that other people have made and like writing haikus with them.
I love the way you played with the frame in this.
Yeah, it's. So I mean, I didn't plan for that at all. That's like the least planned one. That's like one of those like, oh, like I didn't mean for that to happen. You know, like one thing that was interesting about what you said too earlier about empathy is like to me, the empathy that gets created is not necessarily even empathy with like other people, but like empathy with the universe itself. Like there's some like weird creature, like I don't, you know, this is getting really weird, but like there's something that is like everything, like this like weird like space puppy or something, and like when we like get to like know more about the universe, and the space puppy like exists in like a trillion dimensions, and even saying the word space or puppy is dumb, but like by getting to say like, oh, as I move this slider this way, space puppy, the thing that is everything, changes in this way, like allows us to have more empathy with like that entire being, thing, whatever, you know. And that to me is like, it's like actually the coolest is like not meaning to do something, and just like you are never making space puppy, you are like revealing space puppy. You're just like, oh, you guys check out this crazy like eyeball that I just found, and everyone's like, oh cool, you made the eyeball, or like, oh cool, look at your finger pointing at the eyeball, and it's like, no, the eyeball, like, oh, but then like somebody else is like looking at the toe and being like, no, this isn't an eyeball, space puppy is not eyeball, space puppy is toe, you know. And but it's like, no, space puppy is space puppy, homie. Like that is what space puppy is. And
Yeah,
we're just
you
like,
have to like define it as even like that's just
yeah,
hilarious
exactly.
stuff, you
So
know?
like all we're trying to do is like provide tools for people to explore and know space puppy more. That's how I should have started. Yeah.
I think tone is a good way of describing space puppy.
What was the word you used?
Tone.
Tone is a good one.
So for the application of exploring space puppy, like we have the metaphor right here, do you think that'll start on a more like widespread level with using humans as like the dimensional form of space puppy? Will that be the most relevant to the average person, or will it work like this?
Well, I mean, up to this point, and I think probably forever, like it is like humans are the most complex, like minds are like the most complex things. Like even like the crazy like flesh sack that we're all in is like nothing compared to like whatever like the soul that is like making all of this move is, you know? And I think that like the interaction between those like those like weird pure things that are like the iridescent crystal inside of all of us that is like somehow on top of that is like all this like pain and agony and these things that like make us act poorly towards each other, but like when you like dig down and those two like iridescent crystals get to talk, like that is like love to me. And to me that love is not something that is like really reproducible in any way that I notice yet, but like we're getting on it. But like when we reproduce it again, it is not creating, it is not manifesting, it is revealing. Like we're revealing something. Like with this, like I'm not saying anything that I did not already feel. Like I'm just trying to say like this is something that I feel. This is like the furthest into like this weird crystal thing that I can dig. Like let me show you that. I think that the like what it is like how will communication change as new mediums arise? And we're always gonna have words. We're always gonna have like just being able to wink at somebody, or like that moment when you're dancing with someone and you like finally forget to be afraid and then you're dancing. Like those are not moments that are like really engineerable yet, but like it's just another way of communicating is what I'd say. And my hope is that like the thing that we are trying to communicate, the thing that we are trying to have happen will not change. And then like the medium by which that thing happens actually is not important at all. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for being here.